Hey everyone, and welcome to the 5 Bytes podcast. And now a roundup of this week's enterprise IT news highlights. First up this week, unfortunate news. Oracle started telling their employees last week that they were cutting thousands of jobs. This was confirmed by CNBC, with reports suggesting that it could affect up to 30,000 employees. Oracle, which employed 162,000 people as of May last year, declined to comment. Now, there's been reports of pretty shabby treatment in how this was handled, with allegations that a mass email was sent out at the crack of dawn. There was also some reports suggesting that employees in India were heavily impacted by this. Oracle has been leaning on the debt market to fund its build out of its cloud to try to close the gap with its largest rivals, and I'm sure also to capitalize on the ever increasing AI demand. In January, Oracle announced plans to raise $50 billion in debt and equity. And during earnings last month, executives said there were no more plans to raise debt in 2026, all of which could be factors leading up to this large layoff. It's been a crazy few years. Now my mind is completely gone in terms of dates and how long this has been going on. But like it feels like it's been about 4 years of constant large layoffs at these tech companies, and it doesn't seem like there's any end in sight, unfortunately. WindowsCentral.com has reported that Microsoft are bringing the best of Windows Terminal to Windows 11's native command prompt. Improvements include the ability for the command prompt to show graphics such as pixel images, clipboard enhancements, bold font rendering, and better scrolling performance. These console host improvements will come in handy on PCs that don't have the terminal installed, including in recovery environments. The improvements are now rolling out in preview for Windows insiders in the Canary channel and will likely make their way to everyone in the coming months. LeapyComputer.com has reported that Microsoft have released an out-of-band update to fix the March 2026 non-security preview update, which was pulled recently due to installation issues and which I covered on the podcast. The optional cumulative update, KB 5079391, was released on Thursday for Windows 11 24H2 and 25H2 with 29 changes, including Smart App Control and display improvements. However, right after it started rolling out, users started reporting errors, saying that some updates files are missing or have problems. We'll try to download the update again later with an error code 0x800-73712. And days after the first reports surfaced, Microsoft stopped the optional update rollout and confirmed the installation issues. On Tuesday, Microsoft issued the Windows 11 KB 5086672 emergency update for affected Windows 11 25H2 and 24H2 systems, replacing the previous broken preview update. In a quick hit story that is also update related, ZDNet has reported that Microsoft will be forcing eligible Windows 11 PCs to update to 25H2. Support ends for Windows 11 24H2 in October, so you need to make the move away, and Microsoft is reportedly using machine learning to determine what PCs are eligible for the update and then forcibly updating those systems to 25H2. Now, ZDNet goes through and explains that while there might be some apprehension about moving to 25H2 given quality concerns with Windows updates, this is relatively stable now, 25H2, and the update is actually quite small. So it's kind of non-intrusive for the update at this point. So there shouldn't be so many concerns, I guess. But there should always be some concerns. But regardless, it seems like this is going to be forced one way or another. Also, update related and another follow up to a previous story that I reported on, LeapyComputer.com has reported that Microsoft have resolved a known issue that was preventing some classic Outlook users from sending emails via Outlook.com. Microsoft explained when it acknowledged the issue last week that affected users were being warned that some of their messages hadn't reached intended recipients. Microsoft said that those experiencing the issue would encounter it more often when the Outlook.com account that they used to send emails was an Outlook profile linked to another Exchange account. Affected users were receiving non delivery reports with several different error codes, warning that, quote, this message could not be sent. Try sending the message again later or contact your network administrator, end quote. Microsoft also added that these errors may also be triggered when the sender's account has an Exchange Online Mail account with the same SMTP address. I did also scour the patch management mail group again this week and did see some early reports of some other known issues, such as star menu search results appearing blank or unresponsive on a small percentage, reportedly, of Windows 11 23H2 devices, with the issue beginning on April 6th. If you're experiencing this issue, Microsoft said the issue will resolve automatically as the server side fix is gradually rolled out to affected devices. I did also see some early suggestions that the Copilot app may be getting installed via an Edge update, but the conversation seemed to be going back and forth on the patch management mail group, suggesting that currently it's only on a small number of devices. So I guess this one will have to be watched to see if it's more systemic. I did see that the awesome Susan Bradley had shared that Microsoft had previously announced that they were introducing a refreshed Copilot inspired tab page in Microsoft Edge for Business. So this may be related to that. The Guardian has reported that Anthropic accidentally released part of their internal source code for their AI powered coding assistant, Claude Code, due to human error. An internal use file mistakenly included in a software update pointed to an archive containing nearly 2,000 files, 500,000 lines of code, which were quickly copied to GitHub. A post on Twitter sharing a link to the leaked code had more than 29 million views last Wednesday, and a rewritten version of the source code quickly became GitHub's fastest ever downloaded repository. Anthropic issued copyright takedown requests to try to contain the code spread. Within the code, users spotted blueprints for a Tamagotchi-esque coding assistant and an always-on AI agent, per The Verge. An Anthropic spokesperson said, quote, earlier today, a Claude Code release included some internal source code. No sensitive customer data or credentials were involved or exposed. This was a release packaging issue caused by human error, not a security breach, end quote. The exposed code was related to the tool's internal architecture, but did not contain confidential data from Claude, the AI model. Claude Code's source code was partially known, as the tool had been reverse engineered by independent developers previously. Unfortunately for Anthropic, this is their second data leak in recent weeks. Fortune previously reported on a separate breach and noted that the company was storing thousands of internal files on publicly accessible systems, and that included a draft of blog posts that referred to an upcoming model known as Mythos and Capybara. Some experts worry that the leaks suggest internal security vulnerabilities within Anthropic. And yeah, that's kind of my takeaway as well. It's like, oh, well, it's not the end of the world because some of this code was already reverse engineered. And hey, this is just Claude code. It's not the actual Claude model itself that's been leaked. And hey, customer data hasn't been compromised. It's like, well, that doesn't give me the greatest of confidence in how they would handle other forms of data either. Sleepycomputer.com has reported that Microsoft have deprecated and removed the Support and Recovery Assistant command line utility from all in-supported versions of Windows updates starting March 10th. If you use Support and Recovery Assistant, you're advised to switch to the Get Help command line utility, which has similar capabilities and is recommended as a replacement. You just need to download it and use gethelpcmd.exe to run your scenarios. Sleepycomputer.com has reported that exploit code has been released for an unpatched Windows privilege escalation flaw reported privately to Microsoft, allowing attackers to gain system or elevated administrator permissions. Dubbed Blue Hammer, the vulnerability was published by a security researcher discontent with how Microsoft's Security Response Center handled the disclosure process. Since the security issue has no official patch and there's no update to address it, the flaw is considered a zero day by Microsoft's own definition. The flaw is considered a zero day by Microsoft's own definition. It is unclear what triggered the public release of the exploit code. In a short post under the alias Chaotic Eclipse, the researcher says, quote, "I was not bluffing Microsoft and I'm doing it again. Unlike previous times, I'm not explaining how this works. Y'all geniuses can figure it out. Also, huge thanks to MSRC leadership for making this possible." End quote. On April 3rd, Chaotic Eclipse published a GitHub repository for the Blue Hammer vulnerability exploit under the alias Nightmare Eclipse, expressing disbelief and frustration at how Microsoft decided to address the security issue. He went on, quote, "I'm just really wondering what was the math behind their decision. Like you knew this was going to happen and you still did whatever you did? Are they serious?" End quote. Cryptically vague, in my opinion, but there is a lot of detail in the bleepcomputer.com article on how the exploit works. If you'd like to check that out for yourself, I share a link with this episode, which is episode 434, and you'll find that at 5bytespodcast.com or within the description of the YouTube edition of this episode. Docker Offload was recently announced. Docker Offload is reportedly a fully managed cloud service that moves the container engine into Docker's secure cloud, allowing developers to run Docker from any environment without changing their existing workflows. And as of now, Docker Offload is generally available. What this means in practice is simple. Developers keep using the same terminal, the same Docker run commands, and the same Docker desktop UI that they're already familiar with. The only thing that has changed is where the engine runs. And by moving into the cloud, Docker Desktop now works in every environment that once blocked it. When you run Docker Offload, it automatically routes the container engine to Docker's secure cloud. The developer opens Docker Desktop exactly as they always have. No configuration, no retraining, or reconfiguring applications for new tools. Containers run in Docker's cloud infrastructure, and everything, including bind mounts, port forwarding, and Docker Compose, works identically to local. Every connection runs over an encrypted tunnel on SOC 2 certified infrastructure, and session activity is logged centrally, giving security teams the audit trail they already require without any changes to existing tooling, firewall rules, or endpoint policies. Every session runs in a temporary isolated environment without data persistence and closes cleanly. The big headline here will be that it means you can run full Docker in any environment. So if you have been blocked in certain environments from running Docker containers, now it seems like you may become unblocked if you'd like to leverage this option. Iranian strikes on AWS data centers in Bahrain and Dubai have disrupted services that the company declared multiple zones in the region to have a hard down status, meaning that the affected areas are completely unavailable. AWS issued an internal memo stating that operations in the two data centers have been disrupted and that it's working to migrate affected clients' workloads to other regions. At the time of recording this episode, it was reported that engineers are working around the clock to restore services, and I recorded this on Tuesday night. Bleepcomputer.com reported that U.S. victims lost nearly $21 billion to cyber-enabled crimes last year, driven primarily by investment scams, business email compromise, tech support fraud, and data breaches, according to the FBI. The figure continues the year-over-year record trend as it is up 26% compared to 2024, when Americans reportedly lost $16.6 billion to cybercrime. A similar uptick was recorded in the number of complaints that the Internet Crime Complaint Center received, which surpassed 1 million last year, up from 859,000 the year before. The most frequent complaints received last year referred to phishing attacks with 191,000 cases, extortion, 89,000, and investment scams, 72,000, which continue to drive massive losses. Although smaller in absolute numbers, there was still a significant number of reports for serious attack types such as business email compromise, 24,700 cases, data breaches, 3,900, and ransomware attacks, 3,600, plus SIM swapping 971. So the data and number of incidents related to cybercrime, cyber attacks continues to go one way, unfortunately. Finally, in the news for this week, European outfits Inus and Nextcloud have launched EuroOffice, a fork of the OnlyOffice cloud-based productivity suite aimed at organizations who have qualms around sovereignty, provoking an angry response from the original developer. So far, EuroOffice is so new that rather than having a homepage, its backers are instead sending people to the project page on GitHub. EuroOffice is not brand new code that appeared from nowhere. Rather, it's a fork of the existing OnlyOffice suite. And the EuroOffice GitHub README specifically mentions the project had problems cooperating with OnlyOffice, saying that the code is GNU Affero General Public License, AGPL, and claiming that OnlyOffice is a difficult company to collaborate with. OnlyOffice's HQ is in Latvia, but there are many signs that it was developed in Russia, according to the register. Meanwhile, Inus and Nextcloud have said that OnlyOffice's Russian roots are not a security risk for EuroOffice, with Nextcloud CEO Frank Kartolischek stating, quote, "We can vouch for our version," end quote. Rivals like Calabra have made a point of highlighting OnlyOffice's apparent Russian roots, however, and last year published a comparative chart of Calabra online and OnlyOffice highlighting its own UK base under the heading Origin and Ownership. In Russia, a similar looking Office suite is actively sold under a different name that loosely translates to R7 Office. And the company that develops this and sells R7 Office in Russia is based in Nizhny Novgorod. And since the EuroOffice announcement, Calabra has published another analysis, and this time questioning whether EuroOffice is a truly European Office suite, noting the extensive Russian language code comments in the code base the EuroOffice inherited from OnlyOffice. OnlyOffice is reportedly extremely unhappy about the fork. It has published an analysis claiming Nextcloud and Ionus are guilty of license violations with the EuroOffice project. So it seems like a bit of a catfight between these various different Office alternative products and some pretty hefty allegations being thrown, particularly by Calibra, towards both EuroOffice and OnlyOffice. But now this episode's scripts, tricks, and tips. I was a little rushed in this second half of the recording for this week's episode. I did want to cover some of the Nutanix Next announcements, but I believe the event is still going on at the time of this recording, so I'll probably be covering those next week, such as kind of the re-announcement of Nutanix's venture into like the hybrid ABD scenario along with Nerdio, but honestly, I also already covered that during Microsoft's Ignite announcements too, so maybe there's not that much more to cover, but I should cover that next week. But for this week's scripts, tricks, and tips, keeping it pretty simple, I will be co-presenting a webinar with Michelle Moya Esteves of Microsoft on the topic of AppV full infrastructure end of life. So for those who maybe are not aware, AppV full infrastructure end of life is actually next week. So if you're using the AppV management server, publishing servers, reporting services for delivering and managing your AppV applications, you should be looking for an alternative. So we're going to discuss that on the webinar, and I'll share a link if you'd like to register and attend to find out just what Numescent and Microsoft are thinking in terms of AppV. But that's it for this episode. I will also end by saying thank you so much for some of the feedback that I received in the YouTube comments of last week's episode. I have noticed that the audio was kind of spiking a little bit over the last few weeks, despite me using the same tools that I've been using for years. I think that's one of maybe the downsides of me using a SaaS product for the recording and editing of the podcast over the last couple of years. Changes can kind of creep in without warning. And it probably doesn't help that on my machine that I record on now, I'm usually listening back on a headset that's only got one speaker. It's my Sennheiser headset, so that probably didn't help me catch it. I'm going to try some different things this week, so the audio may sound a bit different, but hopefully there's not going to be wild swings and jumps in the audio. But if you ever have feedback for me, please do reach out and let me know. I do take it on board. Catch you next week.